The morning sky above New York City had never seen anything like it. 3 massive ships appeared without warning, their silver hulls catching the sunlight like mirrors. They were beautiful in a way that made people stop walking and stare up at the heavens. The ships moved slowly, gracefully, as if they were dancing through the air. Sarah Chen stood on the roof of the United Nations building, watching the alien vessels descend. As Admiral of Earth's Space Defense Force, she had been preparing for this moment her entire career. But nothing could have prepared her for the reality of first contact. The ships were enormous. Each one was easily the size of a city block, but they moved with impossible silence. No roar of engines, no blast of wind from their passage. They simply glided down from the clouds like fallen angels. Admiral, her aide, Lieutenant Collins, spoke quietly beside her. "The Secretary General is ready for you in the assembly hall." Sarah nodded but didn't take her eyes off the ships. They had positioned themselves in a perfect triangle around Manhattan, hovering exactly 1,000 feet above the ground. The precision was unsettling. Inside the United Nations Assembly Hall, delegates from every nation on Earth sat in tense silence. The air conditioning worked overtime, but Sarah could still smell the nervous sweat of 200 world leaders. She took her seat in the front row, her uniform crisp despite the humidity. The lights dimmed suddenly. A soft blue glow filled the center of the hall, and something began to materialize. Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her sidearm, then stopped. The figure taking shape was clearly not human, but it radiated no sense of threat. The being that appeared was tall, perhaps 8 feet in height, and seemed to be made of living crystal. Its body caught and reflected the light in patterns that were almost hypnotic. When it moved, tiny chimes seemed to ring in the air around it. "Greetings," the creature said, and somehow everyone in the hall understood the words perfectly. "I am Ambassador Zethkri of the Galactic Confederation. We have been watching your species for some time now." A murmur ran through the assembly. Sarah leaned forward in her chair. "Your people show great promise," Zethkri continued. "In just a few thousand years, you have developed from primitive hunters to space travelers. This is remarkable. Most species take much longer to reach this level." The Secretary General stood up slowly. "Ambassador, we are honored by your visit. What brings you to Earth?" Zethkri's crystalline form seemed to pulse with gentle light. "We come with an offer. Your world sits at the edge of what you call the Milky Way galaxy. This region of space is beautiful, but it is also dangerous. There are threats in the darkness between stars that your people cannot imagine." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had always known that space was vast and largely unknown. The idea that there were specific threats out there was terrifying. "The Devourers," Zethkri said, and his voice carried a weight of ancient fear. "They are creatures from the early days of the universe. They consume entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty space behind them. They have no interest in negotiation or peace. They exist only to feed." The hall was completely silent now. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. "Then there are the void wraiths," the ambassador continued. "Beings of pure energy who can pass through solid matter as if it does not exist. They feed on the life force of entire planets. When they are finished, the world becomes a cold, dead rock floating in space." Several delegates were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The president of Brazil was wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. "These are just 2 of the many dangers that exist in deep space," Zethkri explained. "Your species is young, and your technology is limited. Alone, you would not survive an encounter with any of these threats." Sarah stood up. "What exactly are you offering us?" The crystal being turned to face her, and she felt as if she were being examined by something far older than human civilization. "We offer protection," Zethkri said simply. The Galactic Confederation has existed for over 50,000 of your years. We have protected hundreds of species from the dangers of space. We can do the same for humanity. What would it cost us? Asked the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Very little, Zethkri replied. You would provide raw materials that are common on your world but rare elsewhere. Iron, copper, water. In return, we would share some of our technology with you. Medical advances that could extend your lives by centuries. Clean energy that would solve your environmental problems. And most importantly, the protection of our battle fleets. It sounded too good to be true. Sarah had learned long ago that when something sounded too good to be true, it usually was. How exactly would this protection work? She asked. Our ships would patrol the space around your solar system, Zethkri explained. Any hostile force attempting to approach Earth would be intercepted and destroyed before it could pose a threat. Your people could focus on developing your civilization in peace. The Secretary General was nodding enthusiastically. This is a generous offer, Ambassador. We would need time to discuss it among ourselves, of course. Of course, Zethkri agreed. We understand that this is a significant decision. We will remain in orbit around your world while you deliberate. Sarah felt something nagging at the back of her mind. The whole thing was too neat, too perfect. In her experience, the universe didn't hand out free gifts. Ambassador, she said, you mentioned that you've protected hundreds of species. What happened to those species? Are they still independent? For the first time, Zethkri seemed to hesitate. His crystalline form flickered slightly, like a television with bad reception. They are safe, he said finally. They live peaceful lives under our guidance. Many have chosen to integrate fully into the Confederation. Integrate how? They follow Confederation law. They trade only with approved partners. They limit their expansion to worlds we deem suitable. It is a small price to pay for safety. Sarah felt the pieces clicking together in her mind. So they give up their independence in exchange for protection. They give up the dangerous freedom to make mistakes that could destroy them. Zethkri corrected. Young species often make choices that lead to their extinction. We prevent that. The hall erupted in whispered conversations. Sarah could see the delegates weighing the options. On one hand, protection from cosmic horrors and advanced technology. On the other hand, becoming a vassal state to an alien empire. She stood up again. Ambassador, I appreciate the offer, and I understand that humanity needs allies in a dangerous galaxy. But I have a question. Please ask. You say there are terrible threats out there, ancient evils that consume star systems. Where is the most dangerous place your fleets operate? What's the worst mission you have to deal with? Zethkri's form flickered again, more noticeably this time. Admiral Chen, I do not understand why this matters. Because, Sarah said, feeling the eyes of the entire world on her. If we're going to be part of this confederation, we want to contribute more than just raw materials. We want to help fight these threats. So tell me about the most dangerous mission your people face and send us there. The silence in the hall was absolute. Sarah could hear the air conditioning humming, could hear someone's stomach growling 3 rows back. But mostly she could hear her own words echoing in her mind. Had she just volunteered humanity for a suicide mission? Zethkri's crystalline body was no longer glowing softly. Instead, it seemed to be pulsing with agitated light, like a strobe light at a dance club. Admiral, he said, and his voice carried undertones that the translation devices couldn't quite capture. You do not understand what you are asking. There are regions of space where even our most advanced civilizations fear to go. Places where we have lost entire fleets without ever learning what destroyed them. Then that's exactly where we want to go, Sarah replied firmly. The Secretary General was looking at her like she had lost her mind. The President of Russia was shaking his head slowly. But Sarah kept her eyes locked on the alien ambassador. Humans, Zethkri said, and the words seemed to carry weight it hadn't before. You are a young species. You have not yet learned the wisdom of caution. The threats I speak of are not enemies to be fought. They are forces of nature to be avoided. We're not very good at avoiding things, Sarah admitted. It's not really in our nature. Zethkri stood motionless for a long moment. Sarah wondered if he was communicating with his ships, or perhaps with other members of his species somewhere among the stars. Finally, he spoke. There is a region of space designated Omega 7. It is approximately 300 light-years from your solar system. Over the past century, we have lost 3 entire battle fleets in that region. We do not know what destroyed them. We do not know if they faced a single threat or multiple enemies. All we know is that they entered Omega 7 and were never heard from again. Sarah felt her heart rate increase. This was exactly what she had been hoping for. How big were these fleets? Each consisted of 50 Dreadnought-class vessels and their support ships. Nearly 200 ships per fleet, with crews totaling over 100,000 beings. The numbers were staggering. Sarah's entire space defense force consisted of 12 ships, none of which would have been considered more than a patrol boat by Confederation standards. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Admiral Chen," the Secretary General said urgently. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately before making any commitments." Sarah ignored him. She was still looking at Zethkri, whose crystalline form was now pulsing so rapidly it was almost hard to look at. "You would send your primitive vessels against a threat that destroyed 600 of our most advanced ships?" the ambassador asked. "That's exactly what we're going to do," Sarah confirmed. "Unless you think humanity isn't up to the task." It was a challenge, plain and simple. And judging by the way Zethkri's light patterns shifted, he recognized it as such. "Very well," he said finally. "If this is truly what humanity desires, we will provide you with the coordinates to Omega 7. But understand this. The Confederation cannot be held responsible for what happens to you there." Sarah smiled for the first time since the ships had appeared in the sky. "Ambassador, I don't think you understand something about humans. We've never needed anyone else to be responsible for what happens to us. We've gotten this far by being too stubborn to know when we're beaten." As the alien ambassador began to fade away, Sarah was already thinking about ship modifications, crew selection, and weapons loadouts. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice wondered if she had just doomed her species. But a much louder voice was already planning for the fight of humanity's life. The most dangerous mission in the galaxy was waiting for them. And for the first time in her career, Admiral Sarah Chen couldn't wait to get started. 3 months had passed since the first contact with the Galactic Confederation. The world had changed in ways both subtle and dramatic. Confederation technology was already being integrated into human systems, but slowly, carefully. The aliens seemed in no hurry to share their most advanced secrets. Sarah Chen stood in the shipyard orbiting Luna, watching the final modifications being made to the ship that would carry humanity into the unknown. The vessel had originally been called the UES Endeavor, but the crew had voted to rename it. Now, painted in bold letters across its hull, was a single word: defiance. "Admiral," came a voice behind her. Sarah turned to see Captain Marcus Webb approaching. Webb had been her choice to command the mission, despite protests from politicians who wanted someone more diplomatic. But Sarah hadn't chosen him for his diplomacy skills. "How are the modifications coming along, Marcus?" she asked. Webb grinned, and Sarah was reminded why she had selected him. The man actually seemed excited about flying into the most dangerous region of known space. "Better than expected," he reported. "The Confederation gave us some interesting toys, but our engineers have been busy making improvements they didn't expect." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What kind of improvements?" "Well, they gave us their standard shield technology, but Dr. Petrov figured out how to reverse the polarity and turn the shields into weapons. Instead of keeping energy out, we can now push energy out with incredible force. That sounds dangerous. Extremely dangerous, Webb agreed cheerfully. The test firing last week created a hole in an asteroid that went all the way through to the other side. The Confederation observers were not pleased. Sarah could imagine. The aliens had been watching human modifications with what seemed like growing concern. Ambassador Zethkree had visited the shipyard twice, and each time he left, looking more agitated than when he arrived. "What else?" Sarah asked. "The railgun system is operational. Turns out that when you accelerate a tungsten rod to about 10% of the speed of light, it does wonderful things to enemy armor. The projectiles are completely invisible to most sensor systems until impact." Sarah nodded. Humans had always been good at finding new ways to hurt each other. It was only natural that they would be equally creative when it came to hurting aliens. And the crew? 200 volunteers, Webb said. Every single one of them knew this was likely a one-way trip. We still had to turn away over 3,000 applicants. That didn't surprise Sarah. Humans had always been drawn to the impossible. The more dangerous something was, the more eager they were to try it. Meanwhile, halfway across the galaxy, the Confederation War Council was meeting in emergency session. The chamber was vast, designed to accommodate the many different species that made up the alliance. Some floated in tanks of methane, others required gravity 3 times Earth normal, and a few existed as pure energy contained in crystalline matrices. Fleet Commander Yat Shen of the Kithara dominated the center of the room. His species resembled giant praying mantises, but with 6 arms instead of 2. Each arm ended in a hand capable of precise manipulation, and his compound eyes could track dozens of separate targets simultaneously. "The situation in Omega-7 is deteriorating," he announced, his words translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. "Our long-range sensors have detected massive energy signatures. Something is stirring in that region." A holographic display materialized above the council table, showing a 3-dimensional map of local space. The Omega-7 region pulsed an ominous red, like an infected wound on the body of the galaxy. "How massive?" asked Counselor Veth Ara, whose gaseous form swirled within its containment field. "Equivalent to the energy output of an entire star," Yat Shen replied grimly. "But the emissions are not consistent with any natural stellar phenomenon. Whatever is in Omega-7, it's artificial, and it's waking up." Ambassador Zethkree's crystalline form flickered with anxiety. "The timing cannot be coincidental. The disturbances began shortly after the humans accepted our protection offer." "You suspect a connection?" asked another counselor. "I suspect nothing," Zethkree replied. "But I fear everything. The humans are different from other species we have encountered. Their response to danger is not flight or submission, it is aggression." "They are primitives," scoffed Counselor Drexmon, whose metallic body clanked as he shifted position. "Their largest ship is smaller than our scout vessels. Their weapons fire physical projectiles. They pose no threat to anything except themselves." Yat Shen's compound eyes focused on the metallic being. "Counselor Drexmon, might I remind you that those same primitives asked to be sent to our most dangerous combat zone? When offered safety, they requested danger instead." The room fell silent. This was indeed unprecedented in Confederation history. Every species they had encountered had been grateful for protection from the horrors of deep space. None had ever asked to face those horrors directly. "Perhaps," Zethkree said slowly, "we should reconsider allowing them to proceed to Omega-7. "On what grounds?" Yat Shen asked. "They are not yet full members of the Confederation. We cannot simply order them to abandon their mission. Then we could refuse to provide the coordinates. Too late. I transmitted them 3 days ago, as promised." The council chamber erupted in a dozen different types of protests. Some counselors expressed concern for human safety, others worried about the precedent of allowing primitives into dangerous space, and a few wondered what would happen if the humans actually discovered what was in Omega-7. Back at Luna Shipyard, Dr. Elena Vasquez was putting the finishing touches on her modifications to the ship's science systems. As the mission's chief science officer, she had been given carte blanche to prepare for any possible discovery. The quantum sensors are operating at 3 times normal sensitivity, she reported to Captain Webb. If there's anything unusual in Omega-7, we'll detect it long before it detects us. Define unusual, Webb requested. Anomalous energy signatures, gravitational distortions, exotic matter, temporal fluctuations, dimensional instabilities, artificial structures, and biological signatures larger than a kilometer in any dimension. Webb paused. Biological signatures larger than a kilometer? The Confederation databases contain references to something they call macroorganisms, creatures so large they can be seen from orbit. Most of the files are classified, but I was able to piece together some information, such as the fact that every civilization that has encountered a macroorganism has either been completely destroyed or has refused to discuss the experience afterward. Webb considered this information. Dr. Vasquez, in your professional opinion, what are the odds that we're flying into something that will kill us all? Elena smiled grimly. Approximately 97%. I like those odds, Webb replied, and Elena wasn't entirely sure he was joking. The final weeks of preparation passed quickly. The crew underwent intensive training in zero-gravity combat, xenobiology, and what the instructors euphemistically called survival in hostile environments. The truth was that nobody really knew how to prepare for what they might find in Omega-7. Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka spent her time studying every piece of data the Confederation had provided about the lost fleets. The information was frustratingly incomplete. The fleets had simply vanished. No distress calls, no debris fields, no survivors. It was as if they had been erased from existence. Captain, she said during one of the final briefings, I've been analyzing the patrol routes of the lost fleets. There's a pattern. Webb looked up from his tactical display. What kind of pattern? All 3 fleets were following standard Confederation search patterns, systematic, methodical, predictable. They would have announced their presence to anything in the region long before they reached it. And maybe that's why they were destroyed. If there's something in Omega-7 that doesn't like visitors, it would have plenty of time to prepare. For them. Webb nodded slowly. So we don't follow a standard search pattern. Exactly. We go in fast, quiet, and random. No advance announcements, no predictable routes. We act like predators, not explorers. Chief Engineer Tom Morrison had his own concerns. Captain, I've been running simulations on our modified systems. The power requirements are enormous. If we use all our new weapons at once, we'll drain the reactor in less than 5 minutes. Then we'll have to make those 5 minutes count, Webb replied. As launch day approached, the crew of the Defiance received a final briefing from Admiral Chen. She stood before them in the ship's main assembly area, looking at the faces of 200 volunteers who had chosen to fly into the unknown. You all know what we're facing, she began. The Confederation has lost 600 ships and over 100,000 lives trying to solve the mystery of Omega-7. The smart thing to do would be to stay away from that region entirely. A murmur of agreement ran through the assembled crew. But we're not here to do the smart thing, Sarah continued. We're here to do the human thing. The Confederation offered us protection, and in return, we promised to help them fight their wars. This is our first chance to prove that humanity is worth their investment. She paused, looking around the room at the eager faces. I won't lie to you. The odds are that none of you will return from this mission. But if you do return, you'll come back as heroes, not just to Earth, but to the entire galaxy. You'll be the humans who solved a mystery that has plagued the Confederation for over a century." The crew was completely silent now, hanging on her every word. "The ship is ready. The crew is ready. All that remains is the journey itself. You launch in 6 hours. Bring back answers, and if possible, bring back yourselves." As the crew dispersed to make final preparations, Captain Webb approached Admiral Chen. "Any last words of wisdom?" he asked. Sarah smiled. "Marcus, the Confederation thinks they're sending us on a suicide mission. They expect us to fail because that's what civilized species do when faced with the impossible." "And we're not civilized?" "We're human," Sarah replied. "We don't know when to quit. Use that." 6 hours later, the Defiance fired its engines and began the journey to Omega 7. Behind them, Earth continued its rotation, unaware that its fate might be decided in a region of space 300 light-years away. And in the Confederation, War Council chamber, Fleet Commander Yachen watched the human ship disappear into hyperspace and wondered if they had just witnessed the beginning of something unprecedented or the end of a very short partnership. The hyperspace journey to Omega 7 took 18 days. During that time, the crew of the Defiance ran endless drills, checked and rechecked their equipment, and tried not to think too hard about the fact that they were flying towards something that had destroyed 600 Confederation ships. Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge as they prepared to drop out of hyperspace. Around him, his crew worked with the quiet efficiency that came from weeks of intense training. But Webb could sense the tension in the air. Everyone knew they were about to face the unknown. 30 seconds to hyperspace exit, announced Lieutenant. "Commander Yuki Tanaka from the navigation station. All stations report ready," added Lieutenant Collins from communications. Webb settled into his command chair. "Dr. Vasquez, are your sensors ready?" "All systems operating at maximum sensitivity," the science officer replied. "If there's anything out there, we'll know about it the moment we drop back into normal space." "Weapons ready, Captain," reported Chief Gunner Rodriguez. "All systems are green," Webb nodded. "Remember, people, we're not here to fight unless we have to. Our mission is to gather information. But if something tries to kill us, we kill it back harder." A few nervous chuckles echoed around the bridge. 10 seconds, Tanaka announced. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, and immediately every alarm on the bridge began screaming. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. Webb stared at the main view screen, and for a moment his mind simply refused to process what he was seeing. The space ahead of them was wrong. Not empty, not filled with stars and planets, but wrong in a fundamental way that made his eyes water. "Dr. Vasquez," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Report." "I'm reading massive gravitational anomalies," she replied, her fingers dancing across her control panel. "The space ahead of us is twisted, folded in ways that shouldn't be possible. It's like reality itself is bent out of shape." On the view screen, darkness writhed and pulsed. But it wasn't the darkness of empty space. This was something alive, something that moved with purpose and intelligence. Occasionally, flashes of light would appear within the darkness, only to be swallowed moments later. "Captain," Tanaka said, her voice tight with fear, "I'm detecting massive structures within the anomaly. They're enormous. The largest is approximately 4,000 kilometers in diameter." Webb felt his mouth go dry. 4,000 kilometers. That was larger than Earth's moon. "Biological or artificial?" he asked. "I don't know," Vasquez admitted. "The readings are unlike anything in our databases. Whatever these structures are, they're not made of any known material." As they watched, something began to emerge from the writhing darkness. At first, it looked like a mountain floating in space. Then the mountain moved, and Webb realized it was alive. The creature that appeared before them defied description. Its body was dark as the void between stars, but covered with what looked like cities of light. Patterns of bioluminescence crawled across its surface like living circuits, and from its bulk extended tentacles that stretched for hundreds of kilometers, in every direction. "Dear God," whispered Dr. Vasquez. "It's beautiful." "It's also reading our presence," reported Lieutenant Collins. "I'm detecting focused energy beams scanning our ship." "Weapons?" asked Chief Gunner Rodriguez. "No," Webb said firmly. "Not yet. We're here to learn, remember?" The creature continued its examination of the human ship. More tentacles emerged from the darkness, each one covered with organs that pulsed with their own internal light. Webb had the distinct impression that they were being studied by something far older and more intelligent than humanity. "Captain," Vasquez said suddenly, "I'm detecting other structures in the anomaly. Smaller ones, but still massive. They appear to be moving toward us." The view screen split to show multiple angles. From the depths of the twisted space, more creatures were approaching. Each one was different, but all shared the same impossible scale and the same pattern of living lights across their surfaces. "How many?" Webb asked. "At least 30, Tanaka replied. "Possibly more. They're hard to distinguish from the background distortions." Webb made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Open a communications channel. Let's try to talk to them." "Channel open, sir." Webb stood up and faced the view screen. "This is Captain Marcus Webb of the human vessel Defiance. We come in peace, seeking knowledge and understanding." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the creatures began to sing. The sound came through every speaker on the ship simultaneously. It was not words, not music, but something that bypassed the ears and spoke directly to the mind. The crew of the Defiance heard stories of ancient civilizations, of wars fought across millions of years, of the rise and fall of entire galaxies, and they heard hunger. "Captain," Dr. Vasquez gasped, tears streaming down her face. "They're showing us what happened to the Confederation fleets." The song changed, became a memory. Webb saw proud alien ships entering this region of space, their crews confident in their advanced technology. He watched as the creatures surrounded them, not with violence, but with curiosity. The aliens tried to communicate, tried to establish peaceful contact, but the creatures were too different, too alien. The Confederation fleets interpreted their approach as an attack and opened fire. Energy beams and missiles filled the space between the ships and the creatures responded. What followed was not a battle. It was a feeding frenzy. The massive beings absorbed the energy of the alien weapons, growing stronger with each shot fired at them. When the Confederation ships tried to retreat, the creatures followed, not out of malice, but out of need. They were hungry. They had been sleeping for millions of years, and the energy of the alien fleets was the first sustenance they had encountered in eons. They didn't attack the fleets, Webb realized. The fleets attacked them. The song continued, showing the aftermath. The creatures had consumed the ships, the crews, everything, but not out of evil intent. They were simply feeding, like whales consuming krill in Earth's oceans. "Captain," Collins said urgently, "the creatures are moving closer. They're surrounding us." Webb looked at the tactical display. The human ship was now completely encircled by beings larger than mountains. Any one of them could have crushed the Defiance without effort. "They're curious about us," Dr. Vasquez said. "Our energy signature is different from the Confederation ships. They want to understand what we are." "And if they decide to feed on us?" asked Rodriguez. "Then we're dead," Webb replied simply. "But they haven't attacked yet. That means we still have a chance." One of the creatures extended a tentacle toward the human ship. The appendage was easily as large as the Defiance itself, covered with sensory organs that pulsed with rainbow light. "It wants to touch us," Vasquez whispered. "Let it," Webb decided. "Captain, that's extremely dangerous," Tanaka protested. "Everything about this mission is extremely dangerous." Webb replied. But if we run now, we'll never get another chance to learn what these beings are. The tentacle made contact with the ship's hull. Immediately, the bridge filled with a presence that was vast and ancient beyond human comprehension. The creature was inside their minds, examining their thoughts and memories with the same gentle curiosity a human might show when studying an interesting insect. Webb felt his entire life being reviewed in moments: his childhood, his military training, his hopes and fears, his love for his family back on Earth. The creature absorbed it all, processing information at a speed that made human computers seem like stone tools. Then, suddenly, the presence withdrew. The tentacle pulled back from the ship, and the creatures began to communicate among themselves. The song that filled the space around them was different now, more complex, filled with harmonies that seemed to span octaves beyond human hearing. "They're debating," Dr. Vasquez said in wonder. "They're trying to decide what to do with us." "Can you understand what they're saying?" "Fragments. They're discussing whether we're like the others, whether we're a threat. But there's something else. They're excited about something." The debate among the creatures continued for several minutes. Then, one of the largest beings approached the human ship. When it spoke, its voice came through the ship's communication system with perfect clarity. "Small ones," it said, and the words carried the weight of eons. "You are not like the others who came before. They brought fear and weapons. You bring curiosity and questions." Webb stood up straighter. "We come seeking knowledge. We want to understand why the others were destroyed." "They were not destroyed," the creature replied. "They were consumed. We had been sleeping for many cycles, and their energy was the first nourishment we had encountered since the Great Darkness began." The Great Darkness? Images flooded the bridge's view screen. Webb saw the galaxy as it had been millions of years ago, filled with light and life and countless civilizations. Then came the darkness, creeping across space like a plague, consuming stars and planets alike. The creatures had fought against it, but eventually had been forced to retreat to the farthest edges of known space, where they had gone into hibernation to wait for the darkness to pass. "The darkness is ending," the creature continued. "Life returns to the galaxy, but we are still hungry from our long sleep." Webb felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you going to consume us as well?" "That depends," the creature replied. "The others who came before offered only resistance. They fought us because they could not understand us. But you seek understanding. Perhaps there is another way." "What kind of way?" The creature's bioluminescent patterns shifted, and Webb had the impression that it was smiling. "You are small, but you are clever. Your species has survived by adapting, by finding new solutions to old problems. We propose a trade." "What kind of trade?" "We will share our knowledge with you," the creature explained. "Secrets of the universe that predate your species by millions of years, technologies that could transform your civilization. In return, you will help us find new sources of sustenance that do not require the destruction of other civilizations." Webb looked around at his crew. Every face showed the same mixture of fear and fascination. They were being offered knowledge, beyond human comprehension, but at what cost? "How do we know you won't simply consume us once we've helped you?" he asked. "Because," the creature replied, "you have shown us something we had forgotten. You have shown us that it is possible to meet the unknown with curiosity instead of fear. This is a gift more valuable than energy." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward. "Captain, the implications are staggering. These beings have existed since before human civilization began. The things they could teach us might also destroy us," Webb replied. "Knowledge can be as dangerous as any weapon." "True," the creature acknowledged, "but ignorance is always fatal. The darkness that consumed the galaxy before will return eventually. When it does, Your species will need all the knowledge and allies it can find. Webb made his decision. What do you need us to do? The creature's patterns brightened. First, you must return to your people and explain what you have found here. Many will not believe you. Some will call for war against us. But a few will understand the opportunity that has been presented. And then? Then those few will return here, and we will begin the great work of preparing for what is to come. As the creature spoke, the other beings began to withdraw into the depths of twisted space. Soon, only the largest remained, its tentacles still extended toward the human ship. We will wait for your return, it promised. But do not wait too long. The darkness stirs at the edge of the galaxy, and time grows short. With that, the creature faded back into the anomaly, leaving the Defiance alone in normal space. The stars reappeared, looking almost shockingly ordinary after what they had witnessed. Webb slumped back into his command chair. Plot a course. For home, Lieutenant Tanaka. Yes, sir. As the ship prepared to jump back into hyperspace, Dr. Vasquez approached the captain. Sir, do you think we made the right choice? Webb looked at the view screen where the last traces of the anomaly were fading away. I don't know, Elena, but I know we've just changed the course of human history. The question is whether we've changed it for the better. The Defiance jumped into hyperspace, carrying its crew and their impossible story back toward Earth. Behind them, ancient beings settled back into their long vigil, waiting for humanity to decide its fate. The return journey from Omega-7 should have been routine. 18 days in hyperspace, time to process what they had seen, time to prepare their report for Earth Command. But Captain Marcus Webb knew that nothing would ever be routine again on the third day of their return voyage. Dr. Elena Vasquez burst onto the bridge with an expression that mixed terror with excitement. Captain, she gasped, still catching her breath from running through the ship's corridors. We have a problem. Webb looked up from the tactical reports he had been reviewing. What kind of problem? The quantum residue from our contact with the creatures. It's still active, and it's changing us. The bridge fell silent. Webb felt his stomach drop. Changing us how? Our cellular structure is evolving. The DNA in every crew member is being rewritten at the molecular level. But the changes aren't random. They're systematic, purposeful. Webb stood up slowly. Are we dying? No, sir. We're becoming something else. Something more than human. Before Webb could respond, Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka spoke up from the navigation console. Captain, I'm detecting an anomaly in hyperspace ahead of us. Something large is matching our course and speed. On screen. The view screen flickered to life, showing the swirling colors of hyperspace. But there, moving alongside them like a vast shadow, was something that shouldn't have been able to exist in this dimension. It's one of them, Webb realized. One of the creatures from Omega-7. It followed us. Dr. Vasquez checked her instruments. The quantum signature matches the largest entity we encountered. But, Captain, this should be impossible. These beings are bound to the spatial anomalies of their region. They shouldn't be able to exist in normal space, let alone hyperspace. The creature's voice filled the bridge, speaking directly into their minds without using the ship's communication systems. Small ones, it said, and Webb could hear something like amusement in its mental voice. You carry our gift within you now, but the gift comes with responsibility. What responsibility? Webb asked aloud. The darkness we told you about. It approaches faster than we anticipated. Your species will face it within the span of a single lifetime. You must be ready. Images flooded the bridge. Webb saw vast shadows moving between stars, consuming everything in their path, entire solar systems simply vanishing, leaving behind empty space that hurt to look at directly. The Confederation fleets we consumed, the creature continued. Their knowledge is now part of us. We understand their technology, their tactics, their failures, All of it was inadequate against the true threat. Then how are we supposed to fight something that destroyed civilizations millions of years more advanced than ours? Webb demanded. By being what you are, the creature replied. The other species in this galaxy think in patterns. They follow rules, traditions, established methods of warfare. The darkness has faced such opponents countless times across the eons. It knows how to defeat them. And humans are different? Humans are chaos. Your species thrives on unpredictability, on doing things that should not work but do anyway. This confuses the darkness. It has no experience with such opponents. Webb felt a chill run down his spine. You want us to be your weapons. We want you to be yourselves, but enhanced, improved. The genetic changes occurring in your bodies will give you capabilities your species has never possessed. Strength, speed, intelligence, resilience, and most importantly, the ability to survive in environments that would kill unmodified humans. Dr. Vasquez spoke up. The changes aren't just physical, are they? I can feel my mind working differently, faster, making connections I never could before. Correct. Your species' greatest strength has always been its adaptability. We are simply accelerating that process. Webb looked around at his crew. Already he could see subtle changes in their faces. Their eyes were brighter, more alert. Their movements were more fluid, more precise. And there was something else, something harder to define. They looked more alive than before. What's the catch? He asked. There's always a catch. The creatures. Mental laughter was like the sound of distant thunder. The catch, as you call it, is that there is no returning to what you were. Your species will evolve or it will perish. There is no middle ground. And if we refuse this gift, then humanity will face the darkness as it is now, and it will be consumed just as countless other species have been consumed. Webb made a decision that would echo through history. Show us what we need to know. What followed was the most intense learning experience in human history. The creature downloaded information directly into their minds, bypassing the normal limitations of human cognition. They learned about weapons that could crack planets, about ships that could travel between dimensions, about the true structure of the universe itself. But more importantly, they learned about their enemy. The darkness was not a single entity, but a collective consciousness made up of billions of absorbed civilizations. It had been consuming galaxies for longer than Earth had existed, growing stronger with each conquest. It was patient, methodical, and utterly ruthless. Every species it has faced, the creature explained, has tried to fight it conventionally. They build bigger ships, more powerful weapons, stronger defenses. All of this is useless. The darkness simply absorbs their efforts and becomes stronger. Then, how do we fight it? Webb asked. By not fighting it at all. By doing something it cannot predict or understand. By being so fundamentally different from its previous opponents that its accumulated knowledge becomes a liability instead of an advantage. When the download was complete, Webb felt his mind reeling from the sheer volume of information he had absorbed. But gradually, he began to understand what the creature was suggesting. You want us to be guerrilla fighters on a galactic scale, he realized. We want you to be what you have always been. Survivors who refuse to accept defeat, the creature began, to fade from their perception as their ship continued its journey through hyperspace. But its final words lingered in their minds. The changes to your bodies will accelerate when you return to normal space. Do not be afraid. Embrace what you are becoming. And remember, the fate of not just humanity, but all life in this galaxy may depend on your ability to think like humans instead of like civilized beings. When the Defiance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, the crew was no longer entirely human. They were stronger, faster, smarter than they had been when they left, but more importantly, they thought differently. Where once they had seen obstacles, they now saw opportunities. Where once they had seen impossible odds, they now saw interesting challenges. Admiral Sarah Chen was waiting for them at Luna Station. She took one look at Captain Webb and knew immediately that something fundamental had changed. "Marcus," she said quietly, "what happened to you out there?" Webb smiled, and Sarah noticed that his teeth were slightly sharper than they had been before. "We found out why the Confederation fleets were destroyed, and we found out why humanity is exactly what the galaxy needs right now." The debriefing took 12 hours. When it was over, Sarah sat in her office staring at the report that would change everything. Outside her window, she could see Earth rotating peacefully in the void, unaware that its children had just evolved into something new. Her communicator chimed. Ambassador Zethkree's crystalline form materialized in front of her desk. "Admiral Chen," he said, "we have detected your ship's return. We trust the mission was successful." Sarah looked at the alien ambassador and realized that she was seeing him differently now. Not as a potential ally or enemy, but as something far more primitive than what humanity was becoming. "Oh yes," she said quietly. "It was very successful." Indeed, something in her tone made Zethkree's crystalline form flicker with uncertainty. "Admiral, are you quite well? You seem different." "I'm fine, Ambassador. Better than fine, actually. Tell me, how long before the Confederation expects our next report?" "Standard protocol requires monthly updates. Is there something specific you need to communicate?" Sarah smiled, and Zethkree noticed that her smile was somehow more predatory than it had been before. "Actually, yes. I need to inform the Confederation that humanity will no longer require your protection." "I beg your pardon?" "In fact," Sarah continued, "I think it's time we started protecting you." Before Zethkree could respond, Sarah cut the communication. She had work to do, and not much time to do it. The creature from Omega-7 had been clear about the timeline. The darkness was coming, and humanity had perhaps 50 years to prepare. But for the first time since she had learned about the threats lurking in deep space, Admiral Sarah Chen wasn't afraid. Humanity had found its purpose in the galaxy. They weren't going to be the protected species cowering behind alien shields. They were going to be the species that did what no one else could do. They were going to be the chaos that threw the universe's oldest predator completely off balance, and they were going to enjoy every minute of it. In the depths of space, ancient beings felt the quantum ripples of humanity's transformation and knew that the galaxy had just gained its first real hope in millions of years. The small species from the third planet had chosen to evolve rather than submit. Now all that remained was to see if chaos could triumph over order, if unpredictability could defeat inevitability, and if the human way of doing things could save not just one species, but all life in the galaxy. The war for the galaxy's survival was about to begin, and for the first time in eons, the darkness would face an enemy it had never encountered before, an enemy that didn't know how to lose. 6 months after the Defiance returned from Omega-7, Earth had become a world that the Galactic Confederation no longer recognized. The changes had started slowly, almost imperceptibly, but now they were impossible to ignore. Ambassador Zethkree materialized in Admiral Sarah Chen's office for what he suspected would be their final meeting. The human leader sat behind her desk, but everything about her was different. Her eyes held depths that seemed to contain starlight. Her movements were fluid in ways that defied human physiology, and when she smiled, Zethkree could see that her teeth had become something designed for more than just eating vegetables. "Ambassador," Sarah said, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for coming. I have some news to share." Zethkree's crystalline form flickered, nervously. Over the past months, he had watched humanity undergo changes that shouldn't have been possible. Their technology was advancing at impossible rates. Their military capabilities were expanding beyond all reasonable projections, and most disturbing of all, they seemed to be enjoying it. Admiral Chen, he said carefully, the Confederation Council has been monitoring the situation on Earth with growing concern. The energy signatures emanating from your world are unlike anything we have seen before. I'm sure they are, Sarah replied. We've been busy. Perhaps you could explain what exactly you have been busy with. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, overlooking Earth. The planet below was still blue and green, still beautiful, but Zethkri could see massive construction projects on every continent, structures that resembled nothing in any known architectural database. We've been preparing, Sarah said simply. Preparing for what? For the war that's coming. Zethkri felt his internal temperature drop several degrees. Admiral, the Confederation has maintained peace in this region of space for thousands of years. There is no war coming. Sarah turned to face him, and the ambassador saw something in her eyes that made him want to retreat to the safety of his ship. Ambassador, she said, gently, there are things the Confederation doesn't know about the galaxy. Things your people never discovered because you were too civilized to look for them. What things? Instead of answering directly, Sarah activated a holographic display. The image that appeared showed the galaxy from a perspective no Confederation citizen had ever seen. Dark regions spread like cancer between the spiral arms, areas where stars had simply vanished. This is what the galaxy actually looks like, Sarah explained. Your people only see the inhabited regions, the safe zones where civilized species build their societies. You never look at the empty spaces. Zethkri studied the display with growing horror. These dark regions, what are they? Feeding grounds, Sarah said. Places where something very old and very hungry has consumed entire solar systems. It's been doing this for millions of years, and it's getting closer to the inhabited regions. That's impossible. Our long-range sensors would have detected such a threat. Sarah smiled, and Zethkri noticed that her canine teeth had become distinctly pointed. Your sensors are designed to detect civilized threats. Energy signatures, artificial constructs, radio transmissions. This threat is older than civilization itself. It doesn't use technology in any way you would recognize. The holographic display zoomed in on one of the dark regions. As they watched, something moved within the darkness. Something vast and patient and absolutely alien. What is it? Zethkri whispered. We call it the darkness, Sarah replied. It's a collective consciousness made up of every species it has ever consumed, and according to our calculations, it will reach the edge of Confederation space within 50 years. Zethkri's form was flickering rapidly now, a sign of extreme agitation. If this is true, why didn't you inform the Confederation immediately? We could have begun preparations, mobilized our fleets. Because your fleets would be useless, Sarah said bluntly. The darkness has faced conventional military forces thousands of times. It knows how to defeat them. What it hasn't faced is humanity. Admiral, with all due respect, your species is primitive compared to the Confederation's most advanced civilizations. If our fleets cannot stand against this threat, what makes you think humans can? Sarah's smile became genuinely predatory now. Because we're not civilized. Before Zethkri could respond, the office door opened and Captain Marcus Webb entered. The ambassador barely recognized the human officer. Webb had grown taller, his muscle mass had increased dramatically, and his movements had the fluid grace of a predator. But it was his eyes that truly disturbed Zethkri. They held the cold intelligence of something that had looked into the abyss and decided it wasn't deep enough. Admiral, Webb said, his voice deeper than it had been before, the preparations are complete. We're ready to begin the next phase. Excellent. Ambassador Zethkri, I'd like you to witness humanity's first contribution to galactic defense. Sarah led them to the observation deck of Luna Station. Through the reinforced windows, they could see a sight that defied all known principles of engineering. Surrounding Earth's moon was a structure that seemed to be part space station, part living organism, and part something else entirely. What is that? Zethkri demanded. We call it the Forge, Sarah explained. It's where we build our new ships. As they watched, something emerged from the forge. It was sleek and predatory, covered in what looked like armor but moved like skin. Energy patterns crawled across its surface in designs that hurt to look at directly. That ship, Webb said proudly, is designed to hunt the darkness. It can exist in dimensions that conventional matter cannot reach. It can feed on energy patterns that would destroy normal vessels, and it can reproduce. Reproduce? Zethkri's form was flickering so rapidly now that he was difficult to look at. Every ship we build contains the genetic template to create more ships, Sarah explained. They hunt in packs, they learn from each encounter, and they evolve to meet new threats. This is madness, Zethkri protested. You're creating weapons that could turn on their creators. No, Webb corrected. We're creating weapons that are part of us. Each ship contains DNA from its crew. They're not just tools, they're family. A new voice spoke from behind them. And family protects family. They turned to see a figure that might once have been human, but was now something far more. Dr. Elena. Vasquez had undergone the most dramatic transformation of anyone in the crew. Her skin had a faint, luminescent quality. Her eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. And when she moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around her. Dr. Vasquez, Zethkri said weakly, what have you become? I've become what humanity needs me to be, she replied. We all have. The genetic modifications from our contact with the entities in Omega-7, Sarah explained, have accelerated human evolution by millions of years. We're not just physically enhanced. We think differently now. We see patterns that were invisible before, and we understand our role in the galaxy, which is to be the chaos that disrupts the order of extinction, Webb said. Every other species in the galaxy follows predictable patterns. They build defensive structures, they create formal battle plans, they negotiate when possible and fight when necessary. All of this is useless against the darkness because it has encountered such responses millions of times. But humans, Dr. Vasquez continued, don't follow patterns. We adapt, we improvise, we do things that shouldn't work, but do anyway. We're the wild card the galaxy has been waiting for. Zethkri looked around at the three transformed humans and felt a chill that reached his crystalline core. You're talking about becoming monsters to fight monsters. We're talking about becoming whatever we need to become to survive, Sarah corrected, and to ensure that life continues to exist in this galaxy. The ambassador's form stabilized as he came to a decision. I must report this to the Confederation Council immediately. They need to know what humanity has become. Of course, Sarah agreed. But when you make your report, make sure you include this. She activated another holographic display. This one showed the outer edge of Confederation space, where the first dark tendrils of the approaching threat were already visible. The darkness isn't coming in 50 years, she said quietly. It's coming now. Your precious Confederation has perhaps 5 years before the first worlds are consumed? Zethkri stared at the display in horror. How do you know this? Because we're already fighting it, Webb said. Our ships have engaged the advanced scouts. We've learned their tactics, their capabilities, their weaknesses. And? Zethkri asked desperately. And we're winning, Dr. Vasquez said with satisfaction. Not easily, not without cost, but we're winning. The Confederation fleets that tried to approach Omega-7, Sarah explained, were destroyed because they fought the entities there conventionally. We succeeded because we didn't fight them at all. We communicated with them, learned from them, became partners with them. Partners? The entities in Omega-7 are the last survivors of a civilization that fought the darkness millions of years ago, Webb said. They've been waiting in hibernation for someone who could think differently enough to succeed where they failed. And they chose humanity? They chose chaos over order, Sarah replied. They chose adaptation over tradition. They chose evolution over extinction. Zeth-Kree processed this information, his crystalline matrix reconfiguring itself as he tried to understand the implications. What do you want from the Confederation? Nothing, Sarah said, and the simple word carried more weight than any threat. We no longer need your protection. In fact, we're prepared to offer our protection to you. At what cost? Sarah's smile returned, predatory and confident. No cost at all. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. It's what family does. But understand this, Webb added, his voice carrying the promise of violence. Anyone who threatens Earth or humanity or our allies will face something they're not prepared for. They'll face humans who have chosen to become more than human. Zeth-Kree looked out at the ships emerging from the forge around Luna. Each one was unique, alive, dangerous. They moved through space like predators seeking prey, and he realized that the galaxy's food chain had just been permanently altered. I will deliver your message to the Council, he said finally. Good, Sarah replied. And, Ambassador? When the darkness reaches Confederation space, remember that you have friends who specialize in impossible victories. As Zeth-Kree's form began to fade, preparing to transmit back to his ship, he heard Dr. Vasquez speak one final time. The age of civilization is ending, she said matter-of-factly. The age of survival has begun, and humans have always been very good at surviving. When the ambassador had gone, the three humans stood in comfortable silence, watching their ships patrol the space around Earth. They were no longer entirely human, but they were still fundamentally human in the ways that mattered most. They refused to accept defeat. They adapted to any challenge, and they protected those they cared about with a ferocity that had once seemed barbaric, but now seemed like the galaxy's only hope. In the depths of space, the darkness continued its ancient approach, confident in its inevitable victory. It had consumed countless civilizations, absorbed their knowledge, learned their tactics. It was prepared for any conceivable resistance, but it had never encountered humans, and it had no idea what was coming for it. The war for the galaxy's survival had begun, and for the first time in eons, the outcome was no longer certain. Humanity had evolved beyond the need for protection. Now they were the protection the galaxy needed.